If you use supplements, pay attention. You might be throwing money away, or worse, harming your own body without even realizing it. In this video, I'll show you 7 extremely popular supplements that don't make sense scientifically, even though they're sold as essential for health, aesthetics, or performance. The problem is that many of them rely on weak studies, manipulated results, or promises that don't hold up when you look at the actual level of scientific evidence. And mind you, some of them only work in very specific situations, but they're sold as if they work for everyone. So stick with me until the end, because the last one on this list is one of the most consumed on the market, and one of the most misleading when science comes into the picture. First, collagen powder for skin rejuvenation. When you take collagen powder, thinking about your skin, wrinkles, or sagging, there's a basic detail that almost no one explains. That's because the body doesn't get a notice saying this is for wrinkles. It uses these amino acids wherever it finds a metabolic priority. When we look at the science, the picture becomes even clearer. That's because the best evidence comes from small clinical trials, many funded by the industry itself, and with subjective outcomes like the feeling of better skin, aesthetic self assessment, and questionnaires. Some reviews do show modest effects, but they are inconsistent and heterogeneous. It's not that robust, measurable effect that changes the clinical picture. When it does appear, it's a subtle improvement. And this brings up a critical point. If you already consume enough protein in your diet, there's no strong evidence that collagen powder provides any real additional benefit to your skin. It's not completely useless, but it's a far cry from the promise it's sold with. This opens the door to the next supplement on the list, which has the exact same problem: strong marketing and weak evidence. Second, isolated BCAAs. BCAAs became synonymous with muscle for a simple reason: old marketing that just stuck. The idea seems logical: 3 amino acids linked to protein synthesis, recovery, and performance. The problem is that when you move from theoretical reasoning to the actual science, the story changes, and it changes a lot. Clinical trials and more recent reviews show something very consistent. When total protein intake is already adequate, isolated BCAAs offer no relevant additional benefit. That is, not in muscle mass gain, not in strength, and not in recovery. This happens because complete proteins, like those from your diet or from whey, already contain enough BCAAs. Understand that adding more doesn't activate a turbo mode in the muscle. And here's a detail that almost no one talks about. Many studies that favor BCAAs use weak outcomes, like reduced perceived muscle soreness or indirect markers. And as for the major outcomes, like strength, hypertrophy, and performance, the effect simply disappears. In other words, BCAAs work much better on the label than in the body. And this pattern starts to look familiar: a supplement that makes sense on paper, but loses its power when the evidence levels up. And the next one on the list takes this even further, because it involves a word everyone wants to hear: immunity. Third, glutamine for immunity in healthy people. Glutamine is one of those supplements that sounds almost mandatory. It's a strong promise. It improves immunity, protects the gut, and speeds up recovery. And here's an important detail: this idea didn't come out of nowhere. It comes from studies in very specific clinical contexts. And when we look at the science with a magnifying glass, it becomes clear where things get lost. Glutamine shows more consistent benefits in critically ill patients, such as major burn victims, polytrauma patients, or those in the ICU. In these scenarios, endogenous consumption drops and supplementation can make sense. But extrapolating this to healthy people is a leap that the evidence doesn't support. Clinical trials in individuals without serious illness show little to no relevant effect. And that's where a classic marketing error comes in. They take a real physiological mechanism, that immune system cells use glutamine, and turn it into a universal promise. The problem is that cellular use doesn't mean a measurable clinical benefit. When studies evaluate infection, performance, or recovery in healthy people, the results are weak or inconsistent. And this is a key point of the video: mechanism is not evidence. The pretty biology on the slide doesn't guarantee a real-world effect. And the next supplement on the list is the biggest example of this, because it promises something the body already does on its own, all the time. And this is where the biggest myth of all begins. Before we continue, I need your help. If you've made it this far, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps YouTube deliver my content to more people. Now, let's continue, because what comes next is one of the biggest myths in the supplement market: detox in capsules and teas. Detox is one of the most powerful words in supplement marketing. It activates fear, guilt, and the feeling that the body is dirty after excesses. The problem is that from a scientific point of view, this simply doesn't hold up. That's because your body already has an extremely efficient detox system, and it's called the liver and kidneys. When we look for the real evidence, the scenario is almost embarrassing. There are no robust clinical trials showing that detox capsules or teas remove toxins from the body beyond what normal physiology already does. What you find are small observational studies or vague outcomes, like a feeling of lightness or rapid weight loss, which is usually just water. That's not a detox, it's a temporary effect. And now we come to an even more dangerous point. The idea of a detox creates the illusion that you can make up for bad habits with some product. This disrupts the relationship with food, health, and behavior. And what's worse is that in some cases, these products also overload the liver and kidneys, exactly the organs they claim to help. And if you thought detox was just marketing hype, wait for this next one, because it promises to affect your hormones, strength, energy, and vitality without delivering almost any science in practice. Fifth, natural testosterone boosters. This one sells fear and desire at the same time. Low testosterone has become the explanation for fatigue, abdominal fat, a drop in performance, and lack of motivation. And then comes the perfect promise: a natural booster with no doctor, no tests, and no risk. And that sounds too good to be true. What could possibly go wrong? When we look at the studies, the pattern repeats itself. Most studies show a small, inconsistent, or clinically irrelevant increase in total testosterone. And many use indirect, short term outcomes, small samples, or individuals who are already deficient in specific micronutrients. What I mean is that in healthy men with normal levels, the effect tends to be zero. And here's the sentence that sums it all up: if a supplement increased testosterone in such a significant way, it wouldn't be sold as a supplement. It would be a medication with controls, a prescription, and monitoring. That's because the body has strict hormonal regulation mechanisms, and no capsule can get around that safely and effectively. This type of product not only fails to deliver on its promise, but it also creates another problem. It makes people ignore the real causes of hormonal decline: poor sleep, stress, excess fat, alcohol, and a sedentary lifestyle. And the next item on the list explores exactly that: the idea of accelerating results, no matter the cost. And now we have the famous fat burners. Sixth, generic thermogenics. The promise here is simple and extremely seductive: burn fat faster without changing much in your routine. The labels talk about speeding up your metabolism, activating lipolysis, and getting shredded. But when we look at the science, the real effect is much smaller than it seems. Studies show that most thermogenics produce a small and unsustainable increase in energy expenditure, usually at the cost of stimulants. And the effect, when it exists, is short term. That's not what changes body composition. The problem is the hidden cost: anxiety, palpitations, sleep disturbances, and gastrointestinal discomfort. Many people think it's working because they feel something in their body, when in reality, it's just activating their nervous system. This is another classic case of a physiological effect that doesn't translate into a clinical benefit. The scale doesn't change, the body fat percentage doesn't drop consistently, but the marketing is still going strong. And the last one on the list is perhaps the most absurd of all, because it ignores something basic about human physiology. That's because the body doesn't work the way the label promises. Seventh, alkalizing agents, body pH in capsules. This supplement is based on an idea that sounds scientific. The promise is to alkalize the body, balance the pH, and improve health, energy, and even prevent diseases. The problem is simple and straightforward: your body's pH doesn't work that way. And that's a good thing, because if it did, you'd be at serious risk. From a physiological point of view, blood pH is rigidly controlled. Lungs and kidneys adjust this all the time, within an extremely narrow range. If a capsule were able to significantly alter pH, it would be a medical emergency, not a benefit. And believe me, foods and supplements don't change the body's pH in a clinically relevant way in healthy patients. When we look for scientific evidence, it simply doesn't exist. There are no robust clinical trials showing any real benefit from these products. What you find are extrapolations from urinary pH, old theories, or observational studies with no clinical outcome. In other words, it's biologically implausible and has no scientific evidence. And this is the worst kind of supplement. It's not just ineffective, it supports a wrong interpretation of human physiology. And it perfectly fits the pattern you've seen throughout this entire video. Big promise, weak or non-existent science. If there's one message to take away from this video, it's simple: not everything that's popular has a scientific basis, and not every supplement that promises a lot actually delivers. Before spending money, the best investment is still information, understanding the level of evidence, purpose, the context, and for whom it really works. Now, I want to know from you, which of these supplements surprised you the most? Is there any other you use or have used that should be on this list? And if this video helped you in any way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot to continue creating content here for YouTube. And I'll also leave an Amazon affiliate link in the description with supplements that I use.